Hi, everybody. It's Mr. Stevens, back with another exciting foray into Brothers in Arms, the lives and experiences of the men who fought the Civil War in their own words. We are doing this piece by piece, so if you have not checked out the first episode, feel free to go and do that now. And we will jump right in to episode 2, Brothers in Arms by William C. Davis. We'll open it up to the page that we were at. And off we go. Hancock, goodbye. You can never know what this has cost me, and I hope God will strike me dead if I am ever induced to leave my native soil, should worse come to worse. Lewis A. Armistead, 1861, on leaving the old army for the Confederacy. Armistead spoke for many career soldiers from the South who, when the war came, found that their loyalty to their native states overrode their old devotion to the Union. Of the 1,000 officers or so serving in the old army when the war came, more than a third of them resigned to join the Confederacy, including one of the only 4 field generals. The choice was a wrenching one to make. Most had spent all their adult lives in the Union uniform, defending the Constitution they were now on course to attack. What is more, most of their oldest and closest friends were fellow officers who came from the North. They had no other life, no other home. As a result, Henry Heth, on leaving for the Confederacy, confessed that "no act of my life cost me more bitter pangs than mailing my resignation." And Colonel Robert E. Lee of Virginia, offered command of the entire United States Army at the outbreak of war in 1861, had to turn down a soldier's ultimate dream rather than betray and fight his fellow Virginians. General Braxton Bragg had a long career in the old army, going back to the Mexican War in the 1840s. Ironically, one of his close friends in 1861 was William T. Sherman, later commander of the Union Army of Tennessee. In early 1861, Lincoln offered command of the Union Army to Robert E. Lee, but the Virginian felt other tugs of loyalty that drew him inexorably toward the gray. The coat of the 18th New York drum major at left, the 129th Pennsylvania officer's coat next to it, and the 51st New York militia's coat at right. Artifacts courtesy of West Point Museum. Many an officer carried one of Samuel Colt's revolver designs from the model 1860 Army 44 pistol at top to the 1849 pocket model below. The outbreak of war did not just cause the breakup of old friendships, it actually tore families apart. General Philip St. George Cooke of the Union Cavalry had 2 sons in the Confederate Army, one of them a general, and one son-in-law, General Jeb Stuart. The entire family of the Union's First Lady, Mary Todd Lincoln, adhered to the South. 2 of her brothers died in Confederate uniform, and her brother-in-law, the Confederate General Ben Hardin Helm, was killed in action. General James B. Terrill of Virginia wore the gray, while his brother General William Terrill wore the blue, and Thomas Crittenden of Kentucky became a Union general in the same theater of the war where his brother George was a general for the Confederacy. The lowly enlisted man felt it too. In 1863, at Gettysburg, in the fighting for Culp's Hill, a casualty was Wesley Culp, who left Pennsylvania to join the South and came back to die almost on his own farm. Many a family never reconciled again, even after the war was long over. Be consoled by the reflection that your husband and brothers will atone for the father's conduct. General Jeb Stuart, Confederate States Army, 1861, on his father-in-law staying with the Union. Symbolic of the sundered family split by the war, the flag and personal effects of General James E. B. Jeb Stuart pay testimony to one great Confederate whose father-in-law and one brother-in-law fought for the Union. For all too many families, only death reunited the sons and fathers and brothers whom war had separated. This Confederate lived for 4 years of fighting to die in the last weeks at Petersburg, Virginia in 1865. Jeb Stuart came to represent the very ideal of the bold, dashing cavalrymen north and south. Until his death in 1864 at the Battle of Yellow Tavern north of Richmond, he made life a nightmare for the Union, including his own father-in-law. As soon as the guns began to sound, indeed months before, other Americans felt the tug of patriotism. Slavery was what had brought North and South to blows, and in both sections, blacks, both free and slave, wanted to participate in the struggle that would decide the fate of the Union and of the race in America. Surprisingly, the first outpourings came in the South, where free blacks like those in Petersburg, Virginia, asked to be allowed to volunteer. Even some slaves hoped to take part, but only in 1865, with the war almost done, would the Confederacy countenance such enlistments. While only a fraction of Negroes supported the Confederacy, blacks overwhelmingly backed the North to fight for freedom, respect, and a place in society. They had to fight prejudice and suspicion for years before finally they could fight in the Confederacy. But in the end, over 185,000 of them wore the blue, and in 1864-65 mixed their blood with the white comrades on the battlefields of the South. In our neighboring city of Petersburg, 200 free Negroes offered for any work that might be assigned to them, either to fight under white officers, dig ditches, or anything that could show their desire to serve Old Virginia. Richmond, Dispatch, April 1861. They went to war in an era when the trappings of war were colorful and shining. Even their buttons proclaimed their allegiances. These Yankee buttons ranged from those of the U.S. Military Academy to those worn by members of the Diplomatic Corps. Not surprisingly, in a war about slavery, the blacks themselves wanted to have a part. Confederate Negroes never served in great numbers, but more than 100,000 free blacks and former slaves took arms for the Union. This model 1842 musket, hit by a 6-pound solid cannonball, was recovered from the Virginia battlefield. Union officers like these often volunteered for colored regiments because the prospects of promotion were often better. There were no colored officers. I have but one regret. I shall not soon be able to get at the enemy. Private John Sloan, 9th Texas Infantry, CSA, age 13. Regardless of their age, background, or even color, those boys who in the spring of 1861 went off to war saw almost the same sights, felt the same emotions, and shared the same sense of pride and anticipation. It all seemed somehow like a picnic. By land or steamboat, they left their county seats, and went toward the great training camps that would try to turn them into soldiers. At every stop, crowds gathered to cheer them on. Women waved handkerchiefs and handed them pies and cakes. Children ran after them, and some thought even the dogs in the streets barked in time to their martial music. Philanthropists had meals awaiting them, while some volunteers traveled with their own cooks, even their own equipment. One New York group brought velvet footstools, leading some to wonder just what kind of war they were expecting. None of them knew what to expect in reality. Ahead of them lay rude awakenings, hardships and dangers aplenty, and the harsh realization that a war supposed to last only a brief summer was going to drag on for years. Rendezvous points like this Western Virginia community first saw the gatherings of the clerks and students and farm boys who came to be soldiers. Their rusticity shows in their clothing, soon to be exchanged for Union blue. The fresh face of this drummer for the Union shows the innocence and touching youth that he will soon lose to the war. The drums beat the cadence in which they marched, awoke, ate, and went into battle. These are regimental drums from the Union Army. Confederate instruments were far plainer. Yankee recruits encamped in Independence Square, Philadelphia, await the order that will send them to war. Together with their trappings of soldiering, the image was taken in the summer of 1861. Soon, encampments like this will seem a luxury. All right, and I think we will stop there before we start chapter 2. So I hope you guys are still enjoying the book. Brothers in Arms, The Lives and Experiences of the Men Who Fought the Civil War in Their Own Words by William C. Davis. I look forward to continuing to read this to you guys and study it, and if there are any questions, feel free to send them over to me. Hope you guys have a nice afternoon, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye, guys. Don't forget to read.